Welcome to Natural Recovery from Suffering. I get the greatest people that I love so much who come to work with me. I get to know them. I could never get to know people before. With repression, I just taught them. That's different than getting to know them. Everything is different now. Through the process of repression, it was like every 3 months I had a different consciousness. I went from being somebody who couldn't flirt with other guys. I'm gay. I couldn't because of the trauma of growing up gay and being bullied for it. And then just to understand the story a little bit more, is that I had sex with the bullies when I was a kid. So it really screwed me up with regard to love, friendship, and sex. And so I grew up my whole life terrified of close relationships, basically, because of the bullying. Intimacy was a fear because of the emotional repression. So I never got to know people because I never got to know myself. And it's that simple. Awakening to awareness does not reveal what you are. You have to embody it because the repressed emotions create all the falseness. So when I'm mentoring these people who somehow the people who are really earnest find their way here, and it touches me. It's just, I just cannot believe that I'm this lucky that that there are people out there who do want to get to the root of suffering, despite the resistance. This would be a pretty lonely life if nobody really wanted to do that. I probably wouldn't suffer, but I'm just really grateful that I get to work with people who care about freedom and who are really earnest. And one of those people asked me a question, and she gave me permission to say this. She said she was afraid of becoming selfish. Like me, she's an anger repressor, and we grow up not being selfish. That's not us. But we may not know where our ego comes from as we grow up fairly capable or easy to tune into things like empathy, compassion, love and peace, and being good. These are things that are safe for us growing up. And so we identify with these things because we bury the anger. The anger that's buried holds our power, and so we don't have that quality online. And often anger repressors do feel powerless at the surface. So growing up powerless, and then with this anger repression, which makes us take care of other people first, their feelings, making sure that what we do is not offensive or harmful or hurtful to them, because that's how we survived, by taking care of other people. So we don't know freedom. We don't know authenticity. We only know the repression and the ego that it creates, whatever that is. Whether it's the perfectionist or the people pleaser or the peacemaker or the I have to be the best, or the spiritual aspirant who has buried anger and is longing for peace and hiding in it. I knew exactly what she was asking. And as soon as I read the message, I actually felt something, and I shared it with her. I said, that just moved me, that question. And all I saw written on the page was, I'm afraid of becoming selfish. It was just a very innocent question. And I shared with her how I had a similar fear, but I didn't use the word selfish. I became interested in narcissism. Speaking of selfishness. But because at one point I was concerned that I would become someone who only cared about myself. Because I had buried anger my whole life, and therefore I had buried all my needs and wants that were still there, and the anger with it. So coming out of repression, I saw these unmet needs. They were made conscious, and then the embodiment happened from that. But in that process, these unmet needs showed me that at the unconscious level, no matter what I said at the conscious level, I needed your love. Who? You. Whoever's listening. People. When I had anger repression. So when I needed your love, that's because I couldn't love myself. I didn't even know myself. That to me is actually the narcissistic state, is the emotional repression. But I had it backwards, just like she got it backwards, because our system tries to scare us into stepping into authenticity. I mean, scare us from doing that, so that it might say things like, well, you're going to become a narcissist if you keep, or you're going to become selfish. Because this is the thing that's threatening, see, to anger repression. It's deeply threatening, repression work is, because we've built a life out of catering to other people. Our entire life was built out of that. We buried the mechanism that does it. We've just lived a life that was good, that was peaceful at the surface, where we tried to. We looked for that, right? Because we had buried anger, or we were empathetic, or we had to be to survive calm, many of us at the surface. That's why we came to spirituality. We were burying anger. We were burying our narcissism. And a lot of us were involved in shadow boxing before we got here. We were involved in calling other people selfish. Remember? At some point in our lives, many of us looked at people who were narcissistic or selfish, and it was a shadow for us. We never wanted to become that. Our entire ego was designed to make sure that we never become that. We never become the bully that hurt us. We never become the angry dad or the narcissistic mother. We spent our whole life making sure that we were conditioned in the other direction. But because of that, we never discovered who or what we are. We never discovered our own narcissism and our own self-centeredness that we buried. A lot of us have just been too busy taking care of other people, or just showing up a certain way so that we don't hurt other people. We never let anyone meet us because we haven't met ourselves. You can't when you have buried anger. The entire system is devoted to making sure that you stay safe and get love. It's not about freedom or authenticity. It's about selfishness. The ego state is. This is where I had to get straight with myself and with everything. Reading the science, really understanding what I was doing. I had to build context into my practice. I went to study narcissism because I wanted to understand this process and where it was leading. And when I went to study it, what I found is a lot of narcissism. And it reassured me that this is the path that I need. I saw a lot of anger repressing teachers and helpers out in the world who didn't know they had buried anger. And they were taking care of other people like I was, or I had been. And most of them didn't know that they had buried anger, and I could tell that. The teachers, because when you do your repression work, you can see it in people, because you've seen it in yourself. So finally, I could see it in everyone. And that's when I knew, when I saw it in so many helpers and teachers, that narcissism is the repression. And I started to study that and discover if that's what it is. And I discovered that narcissism has emotional repression at the root. And I went deeper into covert narcissism to discover, is that associated with buried anger? And the answer is quite often yes. It's a covert way of being in which we are actually living in a very self-centered state. We just don't know it. We have buried anger, and then we produce something false at the surface that is not who we are. And then that's used from an unconscious level to manipulate and get love from people, get things from people, stay safe from people, get our needs met, but really we never express it to people. We instead, we make unconscious demands from ego on people for them to show up a certain way to meet our needs. And we need a constant supply, because if the people around us don't buy into our stories or narratives, that's threatening to us. And so we may have to find another relationship or another group of people. And that's narcissism. I can't see how it isn't. But clearing emotional repression is not. It's authenticity. But the egoic mind gets the two confused because it's trying to stay safe. So let's talk about the difference. Emotional repression is behind selfishness, self-centeredness, and narcissism. Because when you bury emotions, you have to identify with something that's false. So everywhere you go, you're being false. See that? Authenticity is you being you. That's not narcissistic, that's genuine. That's authentic. You feeling and expressing what's true is not you being a narcissist. It's you being yourself. You just never had a right to do that in this lifetime. So your mind might say, oh, that's really selfish. But it's not. It's the ego state that's selfish. Remember, it's the ego state that protects us with these kinds of thoughts. I'm going to become a narcissist by clearing my trauma? Think about it. It doesn't make any sense. It's the trauma talking. You see, what I realized is I really spent a lifetime deceiving people, and you have too. You just can't see it. I'm working with a guy who's 3 months into repression inquiry, and he's seeing it. And when you start seeing it, it's a completely different world that you're looking at. Same people, same things going on, but energetically, you're opening up to something that you can see in yourself and others. And when people present themselves, you can see that it's false. You can feel it, and because you can feel and have felt that in yourself. Before you touch into that, you can't really see it in others fully. And you'll buy into other stuff then. See, that's how we buy into each other's stuff, is by not being clear within ourselves. If I have to believe something to stay safe, I won't even know it's a belief. So I won't even recognize that as a belief in someone else. And so I might easily be fooled into thinking, this is someone just showing up authentically. But when you do your deep work, you just know. You know that beliefs have energy on them for a reason. That identities are there because we bury emotions. That shadows that come at me have nothing to do with me. That's something that they can't feel. And that deficiency stories are not who we are. It's the exact opposite of who we are, actually, in a way. We're not unlovable. We are love. We're not good enough. We're whole and complete as we are. There's not something wrong with us. When we are our authentic self, we are perfect as we are, just being ourselves. That's a kind of self-compassion that you can't even find until you do buried emotion work, because you have to welcome all the parts of you, not just the parts that you like, not just the parts that other people like. That's the narcissism. See that? That's the deception. No, when all parts are welcomed, you don't get to do that to other people anymore. The narcissistic thing. You don't get to just walk up to people and be false to try to get them to buy into it. You don't want to do that anymore. That's not going to happen. Authenticity is true and genuine. And once you experience it, you can't go back. It's suffering. You can, but you'll suffer. Because that's why we suffer, is our inauthenticity. And it's our inauthenticity that is the narcissism, not our authenticity. Now, just another layer to this, which is worth mentioning, is because anger repressors take care of other people's feelings, what they do is they start to learn, like I did, that they have needs and wants that they buried and they ignored and they suffered because of it. And so as they find those needs buried, they find, you know what? I don't need your love. I just thought I did because I didn't know myself. So I was doing a whole bunch of stuff and believing stuff to get your love, and I don't believe that anymore. And because I don't believe that anymore, I can feel and express everything, and I love. I feel love. I am love. So I don't need it from you. Therefore, finally, I can love you. I couldn't before then. I was too busy self-protecting with repression. That's the narcissism. Is when you realize you do this work and the people closest to you are self-protecting around, the ones that you thought you were so open with. It just dissolves every wall that you've built if you're open. It kind of begs the question, what is love, doesn't it? I don't know, it does for me. Because I think that anger repressors think, and we all do, we're so confused because we've spent a lifetime trying to get love. So when we discover that we are that, or we see we're on the way to discovering that, that can be scary. Because we never had that much power. We always denied it and gave it away and chased after it. But we own it here, that we are what we were looking for fully, but only when we welcome all parts of ourselves. If we try to skirt out of that part, we don't really meet ourselves. We're still trying to self-protect. And that's what narcissism is. It's self-protection. If you look at it, it's repression at the root, it's trauma. It's someone who simply cannot be real, is what to me narcissism is, because our real nature is not narcissistic, actually. But it's also not like anger repressors think it is, where you just take care of everyone else. That's narcissism. Because it's always trying to get something from people, but an unconscious level. Because at the conscious level, if I help somebody, a covert narcissist would never think that they're doing it to get love and approval, but that's what they're doing. They buried it. So it's like being in every relationship, and it looks like you're there just because you love the person, but you're not. You're trying to get love and approval, and that never gets mentioned. A lot of anger repressors just never say that, and yet they walk around needing love and approval from people. It's like making a demand on everyone, but never saying it. And that's, to me, that's the selfish part. Whenever we make a demand on others to give us what we're lacking, there's a violence to it that we can't see. And this is why a lot of anger repressors just don't even go there, especially if they're very avoidant. They won't even go to needs on a spiritual path because their needs were denied when they were kids. They were rejected or something happened. So the prospect of opening back up to their needs might make them feel like, well, then I'm just going to be selfish. But what I'm saying is you already have those needs. You're already selfish. We all are. Because we're walking around with this need for love and approval, but it's buried. And we just place it on everyone. And they don't even ask for that. We don't even tell them that we're doing it. And then when they don't live up to the projection, we get upset. See, we control a lot. Anger repressors do. We just can't own it. And that to me is the selfishness. When you open to your authenticity, you want everyone else just to be who they are. That's all you want. You just want other people to be happy. If people could find happiness without KI, I would just love that. I really would, because I'm not interested in fucking KI. I'm interested in freedom. And if you can find freedom and joy another way, my God, let's go have lunch. Let's go see a movie together. Let's just go enjoy our time together or apart. That's what this life is about, is finding freedom. Just don't sell yourself short. You don't have to. You don't have to land. You can have deep freedom, actually, if you don't land somewhere on the idea, for example, that your deep freedom will be narcissistic when it was your ego that was or is. That's what I mean by landing, believing things that just keep us safe. but we don't look into it. This particular mentee is very earnest. She's going to look into it. But many of us, we don't know how, and we just believe things. And then those things that we believe keep us in that narcissistic, repressed state. But you know what? We get love and approval so we can fool ourselves into thinking it's not narcissism, and that's how it continues. It's just covertly. Let me see if I can share it this way. When an anger repressor finds their power, it's a quality of presence. They find their love. Because before their power, it's like walking around Earth as a false self, but also powerless in relationship. Powerless to truly be authentically compassionate and empathetic. We can't be authentically that because of the self-protection. And so we don't own our power. We need that power to also then embody compassion, empathy, and love, which are quite natural to us. More, they're safer than the power. But if we go to the buried emotions first, buried anger, on a spiritual path, we have our power from the beginning. And then relationship is different. It's full of love because we have that. See, if we don't have that power, then we have unmet needs. They're buried, and we're demanding those. We're putting those on other people from a powerless state. And then waiting for them, think about this, waiting for them to do something or say something so that we feel whole and complete. And it's never going to happen. It's the deeper, more mature work that goes down into the unconscious to continue to make it conscious for the freedom that is not selfish. But can I talk about selflessness for a second? Because this is something that I also think throughout history, it's been usurped by a lot of anger repressors who treat selflessness as an exalted quality. It is a quality of embodiment, but the ego has grabbed onto it, like empathy and compassion in spirituality. So that selflessness is held at this high level, and we seek it as if it's something that we to aspire to, but it's not. It's what we are when we go deep. But when we aspire to it, when we identify with it, when we hold it up like that, we just hide our anger from ourselves quite often. Because many anger repressors think that they have to hold anger back to be selfless, but that's actually selfish, as I've said. But there is a process that happens where an anger repressor starts to see, holy shit, I do need love. I do need safety. I do need to get away from people. So then those needs, which were once buried, so that they could be selfless with others, they thought, like taking care of other people. Now they see the truth of their experience. They start saying, oh, I have these needs, but these have to be incorporated and integrated. There's buried emotion under them. It's all about the buried emotions and processing those so that the authenticity steps forth naturally. But you can't do that by holding on to needs that you have, because that's how the narcissism/repression continues. See, it's like demanding things from others, but doing it from a deceptive place, from an unconscious place. Demanding love and safety. It's a demand. See that? Because if we could be conscious of it and communicate and process and move through it, we wouldn't think we could get love and approval from other people like that's our source of happiness. We would know that we find that within, and that relationship is just an extension of that. When we find that love and safety, AKA safety, within, we just stop looking for it. And the reason that we were looking for it is because something was missing. But it wasn't other people. It was the emotions that we buried. They were missing. Once they're online, We don't need other people in the same way. But you see, that's the narcissism, to need other people. See that? To be okay. When we no longer need other people to be okay, we're just okay. We are okay. We're good. We're more than good. And then we can love other people. See, once you find it within, you know you can't find it outside of you, and you just want to share it. It's just as simple as that. It's not even that. You just are that. It's so simple from the authentic way. It's so difficult from repression. You'll see it though. It'll come about for you, authenticity. And if any of you are out there wondering where stuff like this goes, where this path goes, it goes to authenticity and freedom. And whenever you're doing this work skillfully, you'll see that happen in your life. And if that ever stops happening, where your consciousness, people say their consciousness changes every 2 or 3 months here, into like they show up differently. So if that's not happening for you, stop, because there's a bypass there. We want to help you through mentorship. Let me share one story with you before I go. This isn't quite related, but it's related to the fact that although our fears tell us one thing is going to happen, our freedom just keeps happening instead. So when I was a kid, I couldn't flirt, as I've told this story before. And I really couldn't, because I was bullied by kids that I was also having sex with. Long story, but it fucked me up. And I couldn't flirt because it felt totally unsafe into my adulthood. When I started doing this work, well, by the time I'd kind of gone deep into it, I would walk up to guys and just start flirting with them or talking to them. The only thing I would look at then would be like social norms. You know, is this really appropriate in this setting? But the thing that was holding me back my whole life is gone. In almost every area. In every area. I can't think of an area where I feel held back. If you can see that in your life, that you're held back by something, that's what I'm talking about. That's what repression is. You're being held back by all this confusion around who you are. You're staying safe. You have to hold this anger or other back and then believe the things that you believe to stay safe, including that you'll be a narcissist or you'll be selfish. No, you're just going to discover yourself. And every few months or whenever, you're going to discover more fully yourself and embody it. And it's going to feel even more authentic the deeper that you go, because there's no end to the depth of freedom. I mean, if you've been limiting yourself in all these different ways your whole life, then what's the limit to your freedom if you've been doing that to yourself? There isn't really. The only limit is when we start believing things like that. Like I used to believe, well, my pain is physical. And that's like arguing in favor of more pain. Or when I started to think, oh shoot, maybe I'll become a narcissist, by not realizing that I already was one my whole life, that's how I could have stopped the path, is by landing on those things. Or the other fears that come up, and we don't process where they come from. And so another belief is formed. And so that belief stops it. Because that's what beliefs do. They're false. They're not real. And so they just stop us from discovering our authenticity. But they serve a purpose at the unconscious level, which is quite self-centered, which is to stay safe and get love from people. See how selfish that is? We're innocent of it. Authenticity is the farthest thing from selfishness or narcissism. Both of those things are the ego state. If you're interested in doing this work, and that may mean coming to work with me, if you're kind of serious about thinking about that or thinking about doing that, serious about it, but not sure yet, there's a link in the description. Just come and talk to me for free for 20 minutes. And before you come, please take my repression test at repressiontest.com. That will make our conversation a lot better. You'll enjoy it more, trust me. And if you're not quite ready for that, just go to repressiontest.com, take the test, and that puts you automatically on our newsletter. Thank you for listening.